And this is not beer, right?
No. It's probably the funniest interview we've had so far.
Good.
Hola, New Mexico. Welcome to Red or Green, a show hosted by me, Danny Bernal Jr., and brought to you by the Bernalillo County Democrats, where we ask interesting questions to interesting people, all while eating hotter and hotter salsas with some chips. Today I'm joined by Senator Antoinette Sedillo Lopez. She represents District 16 here in New Mexico. How are you doing, Senator?
Great. I'm excited about the chili.
Awesome. Well,
Or
let's
the
get
salsa.
Yes. Well, let's get to it then.
Nice. What is that?
I actually don't know.
Okay.
I don't have the specifics. I'm sorry.
And I'm supposed to answer
And you're
the
asking the questions.
It's nice. I like it.
It's our state question. It's now officially our state aroma. Green chili roasting the fall and red or green. So what do you prefer, red or green chili, and what do you enjoy it with?
Okay. Well, I like to have green chili in the summer, when it's really, really fresh. Mm-hmm. And I love that green chili on a tortilla. And then, any kind of meat rolled up, that's perfect. Even if it's just tortilla and green chili right after it's roasted, that's perfect. Around Christmas time, I switched to red. And so I'm one of these, but I'm not Christmas, so I don't know, I grew up that way and I love it. Those are my favorites. And then red, I like over enchiladas or over eggs, fried eggs. That's
such
perfect.
a good.
That was really good too. That had a good helping of green chili.
Yes. It's this one I actually do know. It's Garcia's. So
My favorite.
awesome.
Okay.
So coming from Los Chavez, can you tell me what it was like growing up in rural New Mexico?
Well, it's interesting because I've heard Senator Lujan romanticize, going out and breaking the ice when you're trying to feed the cattle and, being out. And I remember it as really hard work. It is hard work, And I remember, there are beautiful, beautiful times like having now, the time of cutting the hay and just, smelling that aroma of the alfalfa. So it was good. We lived in a rural community and we did a lot of rural things. But my father was a undersheriff. And so he didn't like us. For example, a lot of the kids in the neighborhood would swim in the ditches. We couldn't because he had pulled a kid out of the ditch. So he's kind of strict. We couldn't ride our bikes on the freeway. We could ride them on the dirt road, but not on the freeway. So it was a wonderful upbringing in a lot of ways, and it's probably why I love nature so much and I love being outside. But but it was hard work. The part of getting out in the middle of the night and breaking the ice. I remember listening to Senator Lujan describe that, and I thought that was not the way I remember it. It was hard.
Yeah.
Is this supposed to be hotter?
It's supposed to be hotter, yes. I don't really have too much. I don't see much of a difference between these two, though.
Yeah, maybe.
That's the fourth one. You're skipping ahead a little bit there.
I skipped. Oh, okay. Well, okay, I'll wait on this one. I was going to get some more.
Hey, if you want to skip ahead, we can skip ahead. It's okay.
Well, I'm ready for it.
All right, let's skip ahead then. Let's skip ahead.
Okay, this one is a little bit hotter. It's got a sweetness to it. Mm-hmm. And a little bit of an after kick.
Speaking of kind of growing up, as a lifelong friend of Pam Cordova, who is a former president of the Federation of Democratic Women and a former county chair, what do you think is an essential part of keeping close bonds after high school?
Just communicating and keeping in touch. It's interesting that Pam, because I did lose touch with several friends who I was really close to in college because they went their separate ways, and we didn't have Facebook and we didn't have the same kind of network that you can keep. Like my kids know what's going on with all of their friends because of social media and Facebook. And so I always went to reunions so I could reconnect. But Pam and I, we both grew up in Los Chavez. And so when I would go home, you know, from college or from law school or when I worked in D.C., you know, when I'd go home, Pam stayed in Belen. So it was easy to keep up with her. She had the same address for a long time. Even when she moved to Albuquerque, by then I was living in Albuquerque, so we were able to, you know, just keep our connection. And yeah, I think that the biggest key is just call or text and just keep that connection going, even if it's minimal. Yeah. I mean, because there were years that our lives were going in different places, you know, because she went to school at Eastern and, you know, so we see each other like maybe twice a year, but we still, you know, you have those kinds of friends that doesn't matter how long, you pick up where you left off. So what is this? Why is it yellow? It's not jalapeño, or is it?
It's not serio? I can't sometimes hear you over my own chewing. So
I feel like I know you even though you're not a machete.
That's true, yeah, that is
You're,
true.
what do you call them, Belenites?
Belenite, yeah. I actually, while researching, was going to call you a Belenite because I knew that you went to Belen High School and stuff, but I didn't read until I read a little bit further that you actually grew up in Los Chavez, and I was like, oh wow, okay, that would be like, you can't call her Belenite. I was like, wouldn't be necessarily an insult.
But it would just not be correct.
Yeah.
It would be like, yeah, he did a little research, but not much.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what kind of interview we're doing, huh?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so you kind of touched on it a second ago. What made you pursue a career as a law professor?
Actually, falling into being a law professor was almost accidental. My goal, you'll laugh, was to be the first female district attorney in Valencia County.
Oh, wow.
So that was my goal. And up until a couple of years, until Barbara got elected, I could have moved down there and run and achieve that goal. But I ended up going to UCLA, and the opportunities were endless. I worked in Washington, D.C. I clerked for the D.C. Circuit. I worked for a large firm in Albuquerque. And I remember there was a little ad in the bar bulletin that said they wanted somebody to teach women in the law at UNM. And so I asked my firm, would you mind if I taught women in the law as an adjunct? And they said, yeah, you know, fine. That's a great thing to put on your resume. Go for it. I loved it. Women in the Law was my favorite course of all the political science courses that I ever took. And so actually being able to teach it was just really special. And I loved it. I just loved it. And I compared that to what I was doing at the firm, and I thought, you know, I love this. And here at the firm, some of the work is just, it's okay, but it's not just super exciting and fun. And I love preparing for class. I love teaching class. I love the students. And so I decided to go into law teaching. So I interviewed all over the country for a job. I got a job in Arizona, an offer from Arizona. But the dean there, and then in the middle of all this, I got pregnant.
Oh.
I had interviewed at UNM, and they had told me, yeah, well, we don't have any openings. You know, it was kind of not real friendly.
Yeah.
Not real open. And so anyway, I got the offer from Arizona. Meanwhile, there had been a death of a faculty member. Helene Simpson passed away at the University of New Mexico in all of this. So an opening did open up. I interviewed for that as well. I interviewed at UNM, and then the offer came in from Arizona. I called the dean at Arizona, and I was like ready to go to Arizona. But the dean, and I named names, Paul Bender was his name, said, I told him, you know, I'm pregnant, because I got pregnant in all of this. And he said, you know what? I don't think that's a good idea for a first year law teacher. And I was freaked out. Meanwhile, at UNM, I had interviewed the dean, Bob Desiderio, I named names, called me and said, I want to let you know that the faculty was really impressed with you, and I want to extend an offer to you. And I had just had the conversation with Paul. Thank God I'd had it, or I would have said, oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to Arizona. But I said, oh, that's really nice to hear. And he was surprised because he thought I would jump at it. And I said, well, yeah, I have to think about it. Maybe I'll talk to my husband. I'll get back to you, because I didn't know how to tell him I was pregnant.
Yeah.
After this whole thing, and I thought, I guess I'm not going to go into law teaching. I don't know what this means. So then I told this friend of mine, Lynn Slade, again I name names, that I was pregnant. And I didn't know what I was going to do. Well, this being New Mexico, Lynn ended up at a party with Desi over the weekend. And Desi said, she interviewed for the law school, and I thought that she would accept the offer. And Lynn said, well, I think she's a little freaked out about her pregnancy. Mm-hmm. And so Desi called me on Monday morning, and he said, I hear you're pregnant. He said, I'm so happy for you. Being a parent is the best thing you can ever do. And he said, if you want to start later, if you want to go part-time as you start, whatever you want to do, we'll accommodate you. I'm so happy for you. So this is supposed to be hotter than the other one, huh? Yeah, this is one of the no's.
Have you always kind of felt passionate about politics, and what was the driving force that made you want to get involved?
Oh my gosh. My father was a politician in Valenta County. I don't know if Frank Sedillo,
Sedillo?
Yeah, Sedillo. I have a poster of him when he ran for sheriff in my office at the legislature. My father loved politics. And my mother hated politics. And I grew up with both. And I saw both sides. And when I went into law teaching, it's a hard road to get tenure. It takes 6 years. And so while I was always involved with the community, unlike some professors just write in their offices and don't get engaged in the community. I always was engaged with the community, but I was kind of focused on that, and I had kids, and so I was active like in my ward. I was a vice ward chair over time, and I followed politics, but I didn't get real personal. I didn't run for office. I would support candidates, but on and off. And then Bill Richardson asked me to run the Clinton-Gore campaign in '96.
Oh, wow.
And and the reason I did it was because, or the reason I had gotten more involved in politics was when Clarence Thomas, when Bush, the first Bush, appointed Clarence Thomas, I was like, I'm going to have to teach his courses, his cases in law school.
Yeah.
And it just really made me focus on how bad it was to have a president like Bush in the office. Because I just thought that was the worst Supreme Court appointment and we've had bad Supreme Court justices over the history of the country, but this I thought was the worst at the time. I ran for Congress, was not successful. As you know, Deb Haaland won, who was amazing. I was really happy with that result. But when you run for office, and I want you to really, I know that you know this, but when a door closes, other doors open because you've put yourself out there and people see what you're interested in and see what you're passionate about. So you get offers from nonprofits, if you're progressive. If you're not progressive, maybe you get offers from oil and gas. I don't know. But, I don't know what happens if you're not progressive. But things happen, doors open. And a door that opened for me was Cisco McSorley, who was my state senator, joined the Michelle Lujan Grisham administration. And it opened up a seat. And I went for it. And I know the only reason a major reason, I would say probably the only one, that the county commission chose me was because I had just run a race. And, and it was I did a good job. And I was well known. And I sent an email to all my supporters saying, could you email the county commission and ask them? And they said, there are this many emails for the other candidates, and there were this many emails for me. And they selected me. This one has a little bit of a garlic thing to it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a little hotter.
Yeah, it's a little bit after, comes after.
Yeah, you get the garlic first and the heat later.
Yeah, it's disguised.
Nice.
From Mayan temples to scuba diving to cathedrals, I've seen you kind of explore a bit. And I wanted to ask, what has been
You
your
did
favorite?
a lot of digging.
Yes,
Okay.
I did.
Okay.
Yes, I did. So what has been your favorite place that you visited outside of New Mexico?
God, probably Guanajuato, Mexico. I love how they've retained it's a what do you call it? United Nations UN World Heritage Site.
Mm-hmm.
So they've retained a lot of the old architecture, and it's beautiful. It's just a beautiful. I don't know if you've ever been to Guanajuato.
No.
It's gorgeous. It's just so it's like going back in time. It's just gorgeous. I also loved. I lived in Germany. I visited Germany where I taught the Nuremberg trials. I don't know if you picked up on that. But I taught a course on the Nuremberg trials, and it was fun to be in Germany. And I loved the little town we lived in outside of Dusseldorf. But Guanajuato is just a magical place.
Do you speak German?
9? Is that no?
That's no. That's a no. So.
I actually took a German class before we went because I wanted to be able to communicate. First, everybody there speaks English, thank God. And the damn class, you know how this is a mesa, la mesa, it's female.
Yeah.
Well, in German it's Tisch, and it's der. It's male.
It's male.
And I'm like, what the hell? Okay, why is it black?
Well, I think that's kind of foreshadowing, probably.
What is it? God, it's vinegary. It's a spice?
This one is a sauce.
But not a
Not
salsa.
a salsa.
Es salsa.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pero es negro. ¿Por qué es negro?
I don't know.
I don't know what it is, but it's
that's
weird.
a question for the maker, I guess.
You know what? I think it's got a reaper. It's got kind of a adobo taste, like a burnt chili taste.
This one, as you kind of found out, I go through a lot of your stuff and kind of see, do some digging. And we've been asking each of our guests kind of about a tweet that they've made to see kind of the context of that tweet and the backstory of it.
Okay.
And so one of the ones I found was a comic book strip, I think made by Dustin Runyon, that was inspired by you. And here's the comic book strip, if you want to look at it.
Oh, I remember this.
And just to give us kind of like a little bit of a history of it and where that came from.
Well, so when you run for, well, I don't know if this happens, but when I ran for Congress, one of the things that the people we hired to do our media outreach is they have you tell your story, and then they try to have you talk about significant things that happened in your life that were either barriers you overcame or whatever. And so I told the story of Mr. Rodriguez. Remember, I named names. No, I'm sorry, Gonzalez. Name the right name. Yeah. Mr. Gonzalez, and this isn't beer. So Mr. Gonzalez, it was Gonzalez. Now, I told him that I was interested in law, and he said, "That's great, Antoinette." He said, "Because you'll make a great legal secretary."
Oh no.
And I avoided typing and avoided anything that seemed to be leading to legal secretary like the plague because of that conversation. Because I thought if I take those courses, that's what I'm going to end up doing. And I took pre-college, college prep. because I wanted to go to college. You have to go to college to be a lawyer. The sad thing is, or I mixed thing is, I went to after I get my degree from UCLA. It's embarrassing. I had it framed with this massive frame, and it's kind of like, I was really proud of it. And so I took it down there with this big old frame, and I, talked to him. And I said, do you remember that conversation? And he didn't remember it. He said, I said that? I said, yes, and I've thought about it so much. Every milestone I achieved, I thought of what you told me. And he said, I am sorry, I don't remember. He said, that was a stupid thing to say. And I was like, oh, just don't say it again to anyone.
Yeah.
And he actually invited me for a few years until he retired. I went down to Belen to give a little, career day thing. And I would really emphasize about how women can be anything.
Good.
But, I don't know. So I got lost in that story. So that story, I told that story, and then that's what they picked up for the media. So I told kind of, that story, and then Runyon picked it up. And so he did a bunch of little cartoons like that. And it was very sweet. And it was just like random. He just posted them, and I loved them. I thought it was really, really cool. Okay, this looks like it's hot, just like the look of it.
I'm sure you knew this before, but just in case you didn't, did you know you were the first woman and Hispanic to represent your district before you put your name in?
I didn't think about it. I assumed that to be true because I'd lived there for so long, and I forgot who was before Cisco. But yeah, they were white men. And it's my district is one of the few districts in Albuquerque that is majority white. So I was vaguely aware that I might be. And then once it happened, I became more aware that was true.
So how did you confirm it, or who confirmed it for you?
Well, this is funny. There was some magazine, a national magazine, that called me and asked me about it. And that's, I think it was like campaign manager called the Secretary of State and said, yeah, you're the first.
Huh. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so kind of seeing how that worked itself out, right? And you became the first, and kind of zooming out to the whole as America, how far do you think we have to go still to ensure a more equitable or equal type footing for men and women in stuff like this, in politics, in anything really?
Well, men, women, race, ethnicity, I think we need to have a society that looks like America and looks like New Mexico, that looks like Albuquerque, that looks like Belen, that, you know what I mean? I think that representation is really important. But I think what's unique, and this is why the magazine called me, I represent a majority white district. And there are lots of white politicians who represent districts of color. Mm-hmm. But it's more unusual, and that's why I got the call, for a person of color to represent a white district. And I hadn't realized that. And I started thinking, that's when we know we've arrived. If the people representing us aren't just representing minority districts or majority districts of color, but they're actually starting to represent white districts as well, to the same level that white politicians represent districts of color.
This is actually a house sauce, I believe.
Jalapeno, for sure. Very good.
Very good.
Very good.
So, as a state senator, you sponsored, I believe, 23 pieces of legislation in the Senate this most recent session. So since the beginning of your term, so not just this term, but the other one before it, what have been your favorite pieces of legislation that you've sponsored?
God, there's so many. The last one, the Special Immigrant Juvenile Status, the legislation, was moving to me. I practically cried. I think I did cry afterwards. It was a crazy roller coaster ride. And what it was about was federal law permits juveniles who have been abused, neglected, or abandoned an opportunity to get special juvenile immigrant status. This is like Trump babies, who, just children who find themselves without parents or find themselves in the foster system. And under federal law, that status is available to anyone up to the age of 21, unless the age of majority is less in the state, whatever the age of majority is. So the age of majority in New Mexico is 18.
Oh, wow.
So 20, 21, children who are 19, I say children, but 19, 20, and 21-year-olds, 21-year-olds, I guess, are out. But this group of people who would otherwise have access to relief were out just because of this quirk in New Mexico law. So we changed it for special immigrant juvenile status. It's not for all things. So we didn't change the age of majority, but we carved out an area where we would collaborate with federal law to go to the maximum relief available. And that legislation had ups and downs, and we passed it with 45 minutes to spare. Wow. And that was the one that it would have killed me if we hadn't passed, because then a whole group of people would age out before we could raise it again in the next session, and maybe 2 years if it wasn't on the special call on the call. So that one was super emotional. And I remember, when you're supposed to say thank you, members of the body, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the body, after the legislation. And I was so emotional that my voice was like 2 octaves higher, because that was just really an emotional piece of legislation, because there were people, and I've heard from attorneys and from individuals who got the benefit of that relief.
That's awesome.
That was very powerful and emotional.
Well, the reason that was the last question was mainly because we're hoping that you would have been dying of heat at this point, and it would have been harder for you to explain it exactly it is. But obviously you took it like a champ, so...
I'm sorry, you guys are going to have to bump up your game with these sauces.
So that's pretty much it. Now we're at the end of it, so go ahead and you could look at these 2 cameras.
Okay.
And whichever one you prefer. This one's probably the one more focused on you.
Okay.
And just tell our audience whatever you'd like. You could tell them anything, something about your life, something you got coming up, anything.
We talked a little bit about this, prepare yourself to pursue your passion. And I think a lot of times, I should say young people, but middle-aged people, just people start wondering, what do I want to do? What's next? And I think that's what you should think about. What are you passionate about? What do you care about? And then prepare yourself. Don't just say, okay, well, I can't do anything about that. Well, figure out, prepare yourself. If your passion is painting, take painting classes. Go with someone who paints and pursue it. And even if your goal is, I don't know, whatever your goal is like say you want to become governor of New Mexico, if you prepare yourself to do that, you might end up being a state senator, you might end up being a U.S. senator. You might never achieve governor. Maybe you'll be U.S. attorney, I don't know. But the preparation will have been fantastic. And then whether you achieve your goal or not, you will have had a meaningful life. So that's what I'll end with. Thanks.
Awesome. That was amazing. Thank you so much for coming in and tasting some of our salsas and
I'm going to shame you on the salsa. I'm sorry. You guys need to... I mean, you didn't even have sriracha.
Yeah, I know. We might have you back. We might have you back later on.
I mean, I expected sriracha. Do you know what sriracha is?
Oh, yeah.
I thought that's how we'd end. So I was very suspicious of this yellow thing, but it wasn't even.
It's ghost peppers.
Ghost peppers?
That's cow's milk.
Right before we close up completely. So, all right. Thank you to everyone for joining in and watching Red or Green. It's an amazing new show we have going on. Tell us what you think in the comments. We hope to be on TikTok and on YouTube as well. Hopefully everything we can be on. Again, thank you. Thank you, Senator.
It was my
and-
pleasure. This is good salsa. It was good. Not hot, but good.
But we hope to continue interviewing interesting people with interesting questions right here in the land of Chapman.